everybody. Today we have the wonderful Kristin Koval on. She is a former lawyer turned author with an incredible story. I'm excited to hear about this today. And just a little bit about her debut novel. So Penitence came out 2025, and it was named a Barnes & Noble Discover pick for February 2025, a People Magazine Best Book of the Week, a Book of the Month pick, an Indie Next, and countless other Goodreads awards. Her book is all over the place. I found it on the front table at my local bookstore, so she is having her moment right now, and I couldn't be more happy. Welcome, Kristin.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here.
This is a podcast where we like to learn about the story behind the writer, the story behind the book, all kinds of stories. So I want to start with your personal story. And your particular story is really interesting because you didn't start as a writer like many people do. So if you don't mind just walking us through a little bit about your journey becoming a writer.
Yeah, absolutely. I did sort of have a long and winding path to get here. Um, I kind of wanted to be a writer forever, kind of starting in fourth grade, really. But got to college, majored in English, and realized I kind of wanted to go out and be able to pay off my school loans. And so I went to law school and got caught up in all of that, and incurred more loans. And then really, as I became a lawyer, I realized that I was leaving this dream behind. And so I actually had 3 different times where I tried to write a book while I was still a lawyer, all of them failures. You'll laugh at the first one. I had a baby and I was on maternity leave, and I had, very generous 3 months off. And I thought, that's great. I can write a whole book in 3 months while taking care of an infant.
Oh my God.
So that didn't go very well. I was a pretty overwhelmed new mother that couldn't even find time to take a shower. So that was attempt number 1. Attempt number 2 was when the kids were in grade school, and I started and got sort of 30 or 40 pages in and just realized I didn't really have it in me to be, a full-time lawyer, commuting an hour into Denver every day, and a full-time mother and a writer. So that just wasn't going to happen. And then the third time, the kids were grown by then. They were in high school and they didn't need me as much. And I started to write, and I just couldn't get anything down. I kept, I don't know, going down rabbit holes and not making much progress. And then one day I happened into a free writing class in Boulder on a Saturday for 2 hours. And I left the writing class and all of a sudden realized that the reason that I had been failing was that I had never taken a creative writing class in my entire life. I made it through, 4 years as an English major, somehow not taking creative writing classes. And consequently, I also didn't have a writing community because I just didn't really know anything about it. I suppose I had this vision in my mind that you just sat down and wrote a book. And after that class, I realized that I needed to rectify those 2 things. So I started taking creative writing classes at night, and I would come home on the weekends and do my homework, and realize that I could sit down and write a short story for, 10 or 12 or 14 hours and be perfectly happy, and, never once look at my watch because I was just enjoying what I was doing. But as a lawyer, I would be like this all day long, how many minutes have passed now? And so I pretty quickly started to lean into the classes and create that writing community for myself. And that was, adding those 2 things in to my writing changed everything for me and made it possible for me to actually write.
Wow, I love that story. But it does go back to fourth grade though, which is probably a common thread for all of us, is that despite our journey here, we can trace it back pretty far.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So I am curious. So you wrote. We're going to get into Penitence in a little bit. The novel, your debut novel. Um, I am curious though. Were you still a lawyer while you wrote Penitence, or did you leave law behind and then wrote the actual novel, like after your creative classes?
I have another book before Penitence that's, sitting in a drawer of my desk, or I guess in modern times it's sitting in a file on my
Right.
computer.
Right.
Um, but that I wrote while I was still a lawyer, and then um, I kind of figured out that I really, no matter what, didn't want to continue being a lawyer. And not only did I want to give writing a try, but if if I wasn't going to make a living from writing, then I also just needed to do something different.
Hmm.
And so I stepped back from the law, and then very quickly after that, COVID happened. Um, and so then it was just kind of easy to say, okay, I'm just going to write full time. And so I basically wrote Penitence in that second year of COVID.
Wow. Okay. But you all the while you were getting practice with those previous books, which I think this podcast, I hope a lot of writers, people that are different legs in their journey, are going to be curious to know all of the different ways in which writers get to the thing that breaks
Yeah.
them, which is Penitence is the thing that broke you out and kind of got you into this world where people know your name and you're doing these interviews. And I feel like time and time again the story is that was not my first book.
Yeah.
That was the first book that people know me for. But
Yeah.
there's these other books that we try on, and they kind of become our practice books. We learn on them, we explore on them, and it's that's really cool to know that your story is pretty similar too.
Yeah. I think everybody thinks that their first book is going to be, the thing that breaks them out, or they hope that it will be. And I think the reality is we all need practice at writing, not just kind of in class. But I kind of wonder if we all need to write a full book as practice, which is kind of a daunting thing to think about, of course, because you spend so much time writing that first book. But I don't think my story is uncommon.
Yeah, and I think it's that Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours thing where you need to like become an expert at something. I've heard an author say before that with like a chef or like a painter or like a pianist, they get those 10,000 hours in, and they just call it practice. You're going to practice your scales. You're going to practice cook a recipe.
Yeah.
But with writing a novel, we don't get that feeling of quick practice. We have to write the whole novel. We have to go through the whole thing, and that is that's practicing our scales. It's the best. It's the only way to really do it.
That's a really great point. But and maybe a little overwhelming for people to hear. But it is what it is. And if you're a writer, you can't stop writing. So
Yeah, it can be overwhelming until you realize, well, it's the writing novels is the thing we love, and so to know that if your first book fails, it's that's okay. Write another one. I think that's a little freeing because you can put a lot of pressure on the book, and then if it fails, you can feel like you're not a good writer. And um, I'm just learning that that's not true. It doesn't mean you're not a good writer. If you think it's fun, write another one, because it is the most incredible thing in the world, writing books.
absolutely.
So I think it gives me hope just knowing if it's not this one, it's the next one, and if it's not the next one, it's the next one. I look at it in that way, and I think that's helpful. But speaking of like breaking through, the other story that I want to investigate is so you become a writer from you transition from lawyer to writer, but still the next step through is becoming an author, a published author, and to do that in the traditional publishing landscape, you need to get an agent, which is a whole different journey, a whole different story. So if you don't mind, I would love for you to talk a little bit about what that was like for you. I find for some writers, it's takes years, and for other writers, it takes weeks or days. So I'm always curious to hear the stories, though.
Well, it took me a little bit of both because I never got an agent with my first book, that one that's, sitting in a file on my
Mm.
computer. I, probably queried, I don't know, 40 or 50 or 60 agents, a lot, enough that I got a lot of no's or just plain, was ghosted enough to, pierce my thin skin. Um, but even if I have thin skin, I don't quit. And I knew I wanted to keep going. So I started over and wrote a new book. And with this new book, things went a lot more smoothly. I have one funny story related to my title, which I'll get to in a second. But for the most part, I finished and um, went back and edited and did all the things to get it in tip-top shape. And then in November, queried really just 3 or 4 agents, just kind of testing the waters. And they were people that I had connections to, and all of them ended up, passing. And then I got more serious on the querying in February of the following year. And the person who I think I might have reached out to 6 or 7 in my first round of querying, and the one of the agents who is my agent now got back to me. I don't know, either, well, I think she requested a full the same day I sent in my query, and then I think 2 days later got back to me and had pages and pages of comments and said she'd love to represent me. um, and she's wonderful, and I'm so glad that I get to work with her. Her name's Gail Hockman, and she is just delight to work with and has a really keen eye in terms of making suggestions and comments. um, so I feel really fortunate that I landed with her.
Wow. Two things stand out to me with that story. The first is you had connections, and the agents that you reached out to with connections, they ended up passing, which is not very surprising. There's so many
Right.
manuscripts that are landing on their desk, so many queries. So it's not surprising, but I think it is funny to know that the people you knew didn't take it. It was someone
Yeah.
that you didn't have a connection to that did end up taking it. Um, and then and then the other thing that stands out to me about what you said is you said after you sent it out to those people that you had connections to, you said you decided to take it more serious and send it out to these 7 other people or whatever. So what does that mean when you say you decided to take it more serious? Like, in other words, you found Gail, right? So
Yeah,
what
it
was
just
that?
meant that I went out to more agents.
Oh, okay.
I initially I had just reached out to the ones that I had the connections to, and with my first book, I went out to sort of 8 to 10 agents at a time in batches, and I went back. I when I had initially queried those 3 agents, it was late November and it was almost the holidays, and it didn't seem like a good time to be querying. So I really just reached out to the people that's why I limit it to the people that I had connections to. And once, January and February rolled around, that's the time of year I think you're more apt to get people's attention. So that was why I kind of put more oomph into it that time.
Gotcha. And Gail, you just found it randomly through research, or?
A friend of mine suggested her, and so I that was why I reached out to her.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's
Yeah,
wonderful. So you kind of maybe knew that she might like the book
yeah.
that you're. That's wonderful. Okay,
And
and so
the very funny story that I have that goes along with my querying, and this is kind of a querying slash submissions process, because then, of course, my agent had to submit it all the different publishing houses. And this relates to my title. The very first person, the very first agent I ever talked to about Penitence, I actually met at a summer writing conference. And she asked for an exclusive submission, and I got all excited, and I thought, oh gosh, she's definitely going to be the one. And then she passed on it after I got my hopes up, and
Mm.
at the same time told me, and I just really don't think the title is right. You definitely have to change the title. It's not a good title. And I thought, oh, okay. And I didn't really know what to make about that.
Right.
And when Gail eventually sold the novel to Celadon and we got into the editing process, eventually I asked my editor, I said, do we need to change the title? Somebody once told me it wasn't a good title. And my editor said to me, the whole reason she picked up my novel out of the pile of manuscripts to read that day was because of the title.
Oh my gosh, I love
Isn't
that
that so
story.
funny?
Oh, yeah, that's so funny, but that's also that's such a powerful story.
It
So,
is. It goes to show you that reading is subjective.
yeah, reading is subjective, taste is subjective, art is subjective. The
Yeah.
thing that and this goes through so many layers of this. Not only you're questioning your title, and then that's the thing that lands you, the agent, but the revision process when you have someone come back to you and say, I don't like this particular thing, or maybe you should change this particular thing, and then you start doubting yourself. Did I make the right move? Should I change the thing? It's this comes up time and time again at different stages of the writing process. This idea of you have to take all feedback with a grain of salt until you get it, maybe compile enough of it, or you start to see patterns or trends in
Yeah.
in this kind of stuff. Otherwise, it's one person's perspective versus yours. It is very tricky.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I don't know. I like telling that story because I feel like it should hopefully encourage other writers and let them know that just because one person said no doesn't mean that your novel is bad, that your writing was bad. It just means it wasn't to their taste.
Absolutely. And if you had changed the title, then you
Yeah.
might not have gotten picked up. That's unbelievable.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Penitence. So I know that writers and artists in general don't love this question, but I want to ask you anyway, just in case you have a story attached to it or you have an answer for it. So like, how did the initial idea for Penitence begin? I know no novel arrives fully formed, but then where did the seed come from? What was that thing that sparked the idea that became the novel?
There were two things actually. The first is that I really wanted to write about forgiveness because I've had powerful experiences with forgiveness, both being forgiven and forgiving other people. And I had one experience in particular forgiving another person where, I was driving by myself, my mind wandered to them, and I had been trying to forgive them for a very, very long time. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I felt this sort of peace and calmness, and I knew that I had just forgiven them. Um, and it changed my view on what forgiveness meant because I realized finally that forgiveness is not, when you forgive another person, it's not you giving the other person a gift, it's you receiving a gift. And I don't know if you are receiving it from yourself, or you're giving the gift to yourself, or, to me, it kind of felt like a gift from God or the universe. I know I'm not really sure that it was me giving myself the gift because I think I needed a push to forgive this person. Um, but that change in perspective made my life a lot better because I can walk around now and it's so much easier for me to forgive other people and to let things go. And it was such a great feeling the day that I did forgive this person, that sort of sense of peace and calm and forgiveness, that I knew I wanted to write about forgiveness. But I had no idea how to do that without sounding like I was moralizing or kind of preaching to the reader. And so I struggled for a while, really, as to how that might happen when the second little inspirational thing came along, which was that I had seen in the news a couple of different instances of juvenile fratricide. And in those instances, my heart always went out to the parents, just kind of imagining what they were going through. I wasn't interested in the salacious details of the crime. I was interested in the aftermath. And I realized that starting a novel with a juvenile fratricide would give me the opportunity to explore forgiveness in all of its messiness and complexity, and yet kind of showcase how joyful and beneficial forgiveness can be in a person's life. Because you're putting the parents in the easiest possible position to forgive. Because if they don't forgive the second child who killed the first child, they will have lost both children. And the hardest possible position to forgive, because that second child killed the first child. So, what better way to explore forgiveness, and again, how complicated it is without sounding preachy?
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, it was it's the perfect premise to embody the it's the perfect premise to embody to be a vehicle to carry your exploration of forgiveness, but also it allows you. It's imbibed with so much tension from the start, like from nothing, even before you write the first sentence. It's all there. It's so loaded with all of that. So it is such a genius way to set up a story. So, and it's incredible. So
Thank
congratulations
you.
on that. Yeah.
Thank
Um,
you.
I do want to talk about the process of writing the book. So every book is different, as you know. The process of writing a book is different. Book two, writing book two is different from writing book one, and writing book three is different from book two. So I'm curious for this particular book, what you found to be the most challenging part. What was the most challenging aspect of this book coming together? Like, what did you maybe grapple with the most or struggle with in revisions, or that almost like what was that thing where once it clicked, you were like, I got it. This is now.
Yeah, that would be actually Nora's chapters. So, just for people listening to the podcast that haven't read the book yet, it's the novel is told from four different points of view. From Nora's point of view, who's the 13-year-old girl who has killed her 14-year-old brother, her mother Angie, Martine, who is a local lawyer, and Martine's son, Julian, who is a specialized criminal defense attorney from New York. So you've got four different points of views. And I did that because I really wanted the reader to walk in the shoes of each character so that it would help them develop empathy for each character. But I struggled terribly with Nora's chapters. I just could not get in her head. Um, and I think it's partly because she's 13, and more importantly, because she suffers from, a mental illness. And I had done a lot of research on mental illness in younger kids, and the experts don't understand mental illness in a 13-year-old. So I think there was a reason that I couldn't understand it either. And if I couldn't understand it, I couldn't really write from her point of view. So what I did was I decided to back out and tell her, or back off kind of, and tell her story from an omniscient point of view, which I know is kind of an unusual choice. And I was really nervous about making that choice because it's not in vogue to write in an with an omniscient narrator. But I think it ended up, once I wrote that first chapter in that omniscient voice, that's where I said, I can do this, because it made her chapters so much better to be able to have the omniscient narrator not just describing what was happening with Nora, but it kind of opened up a door for me to describe what was happening in the juvenile detention center and kind of explore biases and cruelties that a 13-year-old might not necessarily notice. Um, and it just gave me a freedom that I wouldn't have had if I had stayed in, in a close third inside of Nora's head.
Oh, I love that answer. This like it sparked all of these thoughts for me. So, are you then saying that that first chapter was not originally written in that way, and that you had to first crack open the Nora thing, and then you went back and reconstructed the first chapter,
No,
Omniscient?
actually the prologue I always did in that omniscient voice.
Oh, okay.
To be honest, I wrote that prologue and almost I'm not sure I really revised it at all. I mean, I did, but like very, very minor little revisions. Um, but Nora's chapters specifically, I didn't really intend to ever go back to that omniscient voice that you
Oh, I
have in the
see.
prologue. And then once I moved into Nora's chapters, and the first time I ever wrote a chapter for her was a disaster. I'm not even sure I kept it on my computer. I may have deleted it. But it was really just her chapters.
I got it. So two things. Number one, that opening is incredible. It is such a brilliant way to set up a novel where you're going to be jumping in and out of different characters' heads. I write most of my stuff in multi POV as well, and I just kind of just like throw the reader into it, you know. But
Yeah.
yours really sets it up in a way where you know what you're getting. You know that you're going to be getting into all of these characters, and it just feels very cinematic, like this sweeping camera that's kind of like sweeping through town. It's just really cool. I really loved it,
Thank you. Thank you.
and what you reminded me of is this idea that so much of writing sometimes is like these happy little accidents where we're writing almost towards something. We don't quite know where we're going all the time, but we're writing toward it. And you opening the novel with this omniscient voice, even though you didn't know it at the time, allowed you to then come return to that with Nora
Yeah.
in this like just like fortuitous way.
Yeah,
That's really
and it was a very happy accident.
awesome. I'd said one more question about I know it's also written in dual timeline. Was that always constructed in dual timeline as well, jumping back and forth between the past and the present, or is that something that like came later in the process?
No, I think I got about 50 pages in, and I realized that if I was really going to have the reader walk in the shoes of each character, the reader needed to know the history of those characters, the relevant history. And I realized I had too much backstory to kind of just shove it in as backstory, pages and pages of backstory in the middle of a chapter that took place in the present. To me, didn't seem like it was going to work out as well. So I started experimenting with just telling some of the story on this other timeline and found that it worked a lot better.
Yeah, it's wonderful. I love the dual timeline aspect of it, and I think you're right. I think it allows us specifically to unpack those layers of forgiveness. We need to go back to the past for the adult characters and find out what how those layers are, how complicated and complex those layers really are,
Right.
because it's the present story on top of the other story that really compounds everything. So I think that was, again, what a great move.
Yeah,
Um,
dual timelines kind of give you a freedom. I mean, I don't want to do it forever and ever, and but I like it. And Liz Moore does a lot of it. She did a ton of that in The God of the Woods, and
yes,
I loved how she did it because she had timelines all over the place.
absolutely.
I don't
Yeah,
know how I don't know how she pulled that off, but
she really pulled it off. I love that book, and
she's my hero.
I'm currently trying it with my book right now. I have dual timelines in two of the four books I've written, so it's something I like as well. But again,
Yeah,
not always. It just depends on what the story needs.
yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna wrap up in a couple of minutes. But I just have I want to end with like a fast round of like just a series of questions that are. It could be one word answers. You can
Okay.
speak for a little longer if you want, but these are meant to be answered quickly. and kind of lighthearted. The first is the classic. Would you consider yourself a plotter or a pantser?
Oh, I'm somewhere in between. Actually, I taught a class on writing in between plotting and pantsing.
Oh, perfect. So you're the perfect mix.
Yes. Oh, I don't know if
Yes.
it's the perfect mess, but I can't actually answer. That's not a one-word answer for me. Sorry.
Good. No, that's a great answer. Probably if pressed, every writer would maybe end up saying that, some
Yeah.
version of that too. And what's one writing rule that you don't really agree with, that you struggle with?
Oh, I don't like to write character sketches.
Yeah, you know what? I've attempted, and they've never helped me. I could say that for sure.
Yeah.
I get kind of lost in the weeds of things that maybe don't really matter. Oh, I love that one. Who inspires you? It could be a writer or otherwise.
Oh gosh, that is a really hard question because I'm inspired by a lot of different people in my life. They've all inspired me in different ways. I think I'm going to actually say I would just point to my family, because I have, two great sons and a great husband and, um, parents and grandparents. And I've learned from all, and family is who you usually have your longest relationships with. And I think if we take the time to listen to some of their stories, you can learn a lot and be inspired by them.
Oh, beautiful answer. Two more. If you could offer one piece of advice to aspiring writers, one piece of advice, what would that be?
Don't quit.
Oh, great one. And this is the final one. We're going to end on this question. And this may be my favorite of all. Name a book that changed your life. Now, this could be when you were 5 years old. It could be last year.
Sing Unburied Sing by Jessamine Ward.
Oh, I'm not familiar with that book.
Oh, it's not only is she an amazing and beautiful writer, just incredibly lyrical, but there's a little bit of mystery in there as well. But most importantly, after I read that book, I realized how important it was to be able to have a reader walk in the shoes of each character, because she in that book has you walk in the shoes of a very unlikable character, and by the end you may not want to rush up and give the character a hug, but maybe you do, because I don't know, you at the end you understand this person. She's amazing. I strongly suggest reading the book.
Oh, it sounds awesome. And where did you come across this on your journey? Was this recently? Was this when you were younger? I'm not.
Maybe like 4 or 5 years ago.
4 or 5 years ago. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. I'll
Maybe,
have to check.
yeah, I can't remember when I read it. I think I maybe read it 4 years ago.
I'll have to check that out. That sounds really cool. All right, Kristin, thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
Thank
I
you
know
so
you're
much for
busy.
having me. This was a lot of fun. I love talking about writing, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Of course. And your novel's incredible. Everyone go out and get her novel, Penitence. It is unbelievable. I wish you the best of luck as you continue to celebrate your novel and go on the tour with your book and do all of this press stuff. And on future, all your future stuff that you're working on. Is there anything you want to plug, or is anything that a way you want people to find you, or?
They can look up my website is actually pretty simple, just KristinKoval.com, if they want to follow along on any book events or anything like that. And thank you again so much for having me.
Of course. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for watching The Right Thing. If you're interested in learning more about what we talked about in today's podcast, you can head over to Substack to check out my newsletter at jasonarehart.substack.com for an even deeper look into the writer's journey. Also, make sure you subscribe to the podcast. That way you can check out all the things we'll be talking about in the coming weeks. We'll be back next time with another interview, offering more insights to take your craft to the next level. Until then, just keep writing.